So now it gives me great pleasure to turn it over to Tom. Tom Lawrence, are you ready? I'm
Yeah,
still in Wolf's screen share, so he
I
needs
don't
to.
see how to stop sharing.
Yeah, that's the problem with Zoom. When you start sharing, your little screen thing gets hidden. There he is. There he is.
It's a whole
So
new way now.
yeah, yeah, they change it like every other day. So, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you,
All
hopefully, you
right.
should be able to share your screen.
Yep.
I've got sharing turned on for everybody, so go ahead and share your screen. And I'm looking forward to hearing all about this because I am using XCP-ng myself, and it's pretty cool. And I've been using VMware for like 15 years. Well, really since beta back in like 1998, but
Yeah,
seriously for about
I
15 years.
think the VMware is probably the first virtualization I cut my teeth on before I switched to using other things. But yeah, I'll go ahead and is it sharing my screen? it
Yeah,
is.
I see it.
All right,
I
cool.
see it.
Let me go ahead and make it full. All right, did it go full?
It's working on it. It says loading. Is that what you see?
I show it
There we
loading.
go.
Okay,
There we
that's
go.
why I was asking. I know in Zoom, I've
Yeah,
done these over Zoom, and sometimes they go smooth, sometimes it pauses.
it looks good.
All right, cool. XCP-ng Xen Orchestra open source virtualization platform, and obviously one of the reasons it's popular is exactly what you mentioned. We'll just say Broadcom was less than great with
Hmm.
what they did to VMware, so that's been bringing up this as a more popular solution. Quickly about me is I own a company called Lawrence Systems. I also have a company called CNWR. I used to do it all under one name. We split it up. So CNWR is where I do IT consulting and MSP IT services, and Lawrence Systems is my YouTube channel, educational content, media production. So I kind of sit in between these. I talk about the projects we do. So my experiences from practical usage of all of this. As you mentioned, I was on YouTube. I still am a practitioner, as I mentioned, where I'm still doing installs and design and uh, all that fun stuff with things like XCP-ng, networking, um, storage servers, and then my YouTube channel currently has, as of today, 355,000 subscribers. I was like, quite a few. Now, I just did this as a video the other day talking about whether or not this is enterprise ready. Absolutely. That's one thing about XCP-ng, and we'll get into the history of it. But this is something we use commercially for some very large companies. Some of them are that we've consulted with, they're publicly traded, that we've helped with some of the setup and initial install. And this started a while ago. If you go look at the main Xen list, you'll see some companies on there that have names like Honda, and it's actually some of the core pieces of Xen are actually used in the automotive space in different niches. My slides are moving forward, right?
Yes.
Okay. It
Yes.
says the XCP-ng enterprise ready. I just want to
Yep.
make sure.
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right,
Yep.
no problem. Just double checking because I see all of them without seeing loading. So, all right. XCP-ng is based on the Xen Hypervisor project. So it's an official sub project, if you will. So XCP-ng is the full host operating system that sits on top of the Xen Hypervisor. So Xen Hypervisor is actually used quite a few places. One of the other Linux distros that specifically uses it is Cubes OS. If you've been familiar with that, that's kind of the Xen Hypervisor is very popular because of its very strict rules around isolation, and it's been in a Linux kernel for I think about 20 years now. So its deep integration into Linux, along with very strict isolation, makes it quite popular for people who are very security oriented on it. It's one of the big advantages of Xen. So Xen Project itself kicked off in 2003. Somewhere along the lines, it became part of the Linux Foundation. I don't remember exactly when it was, probably around 2017 or 2018, I think. But it became an official Linux Foundation project as well. Now, this is not XCP-ng. This is the Xen hypervisor that XCP-ng is built upon. But they're also paired up because the same developers developing and contributing upstream to Xen are also the team at Vates who is building XCP-ng. And it's all open source from start to finish. Now, this is a little bit of forgotten history, but in 2017, Citrix made some changes. And the way those changes went was you updated your Citrix XenServer. So Citrix was a really popular version of Xen. And oddly, it was mostly open source, except for Citrix would sprinkle in some of their licensing silliness. And they had this idea to extract money out of people by going from version 7.2 to 7.3, you would lose all the free features and it would require a license, like being able to migrate VMs, all the normal virtualization stuff that was just built into Citrix for years. Citrix just kind of pulled a fast one. Here's an update. And no one reads every little detail, but somewhere in the bottom, Citrix decided they were just going to remove all the features and put everything behind a license. Basically, you'd end up with a system that didn't function anymore, other than some really rudimentary things. And everything was like, oh, yeah, you got to give us a license now. And I was like, well, these features were always there. So Citrix kind of wasn't great for the community. And this is basically how XCP-ng started. The people over at Vate said, it's open source, we can fork it. So they did. And that's the beauty of open source, because if Broadcom buys VMware, but VMware is not open source, well, we all just kind of start looking for alternatives. The beauty of the fact that Xen and that whole project was open source was they said, we don't really need Citrix to build it. We can form a team to build it. They started a Kickstarter campaign. They only thought they needed about, and this at the time was a little bit more money in the US. I only had a screenshot from what it was in euros. They only needed about $6,000, they thought, to get started. They got funded for 38,000 euros. To get started. So the Kickstarter campaign that kicked this off actually went really, really well. And from that, XCP-ng was born. Now, what was interesting and what made this so popular instantly in the enterprise space was enterprises weren't thrilled with the way Citrix changed the licensing, because even if you already had a license, they upped their license tiers. Same thing Broadcom did. Like, we already have a license we paid for, but now you got to pay more and you're not changing the product any. So when XCP-ng came out, what made it interesting to the enterprise world was you just loaded XCP-ng right on top of Citrix. All your VMs were there. You didn't import them. They were just there. It in place left everything and basically just swapped out the DOM 0, which is, as they refer to in XCP-ng, the host OS got swapped, but nothing changed. All your settings were there. Everything was exactly there. So people are like, oh, I can just toss this over the top of Citrix. So it became popular really, really fast. It was a great move on their part that they didn't add any friction, which of course with enterprise companies, as everyone knows, Citrix was pretty big in the enterprise, and to some extent they still are, because people don't switch things very fast. But this made them kind of get a niche in really, really fast and start ramping up. Now, Vates is the company behind this. Vates has been around since about 2010-ish, and they have a product called Xen Orchestra. So we're going to get into the differences between XCP-ng and Xen Orchestra, but the company behind both of them is Vates. They are very, very committed. Oliver, their CEO, they're huge in the open source community. They attend a lot of events in Europe, but everything they do, they give away. They are true blood open source people. Everyone that works there, they got a pretty big team. And it's one of the reasons I started working with them all the way back years ago to help promote their product and start doing videos or creating documentation. Anyways, I could help the project out because they absolutely were committed to the concept of open source. And I'm like, I'm here for that. Matter of fact, one of the things that was very important to them is they said, if anything ever happens to Oliver, the leader, and he goes, someone else takes over and, wants to change things around, all the licenses are completely, you can fork anything. And he does that on purpose for everything they do, because he goes, that's the way it should be, because, when a Citrix comes along and makes some changes, you don't want to be out of, out of a product you like. But Xen Orchestra is the orchestration tool that manages all of the XCP-ng hosts. So that's actually been a Vates product that worked with Citrix all the way back. 2012 is their first release of it. And that worked with Citrix XenServer perfectly fine. So Vates did have some interest, because if people left the Citrix XenServer, you wouldn't want to use Xen Orchestra, because the only thing it did was make managing Citrix servers easier. So when they came up with XCP-ng, and to this day, because Citrix actually still has their server, they renamed it a little bit to make it more confusing. But the Citrix Hypervisor will work with this as well. So it actually supports both, and it can support them simultaneously. So this is the fundraising history that Vates did. Then their first release was in actually, they fundraised in 2017, but the first release was 2018 in March. Vates themselves became a big part of the Linux Foundation. They're part of the board of directors now on the Xen project. So they're, like I said, their love of open source got them deeply involved in supporting other open source projects as well. They've also joined the RISC-V, the RISC-V. They've joined that because there's versions of Xen, not XCP-ng, but versions of Xen run on RISC. They're rebuilding and going to make versions of the XCP-ng that will be on RISC as well. So I think that's really kind of a great thing they're doing there to keep it, because we see a lot of popularity among RISC, and be pretty interesting to see that as well. The Xen architecture, DOM 0 is where everything lives. So when you load a host up, it is truly a type 1 hypervisor because it loads DOM 0, which gets confusing to some people because it'll SSH into a host and it'll have, let's say, 32 cores, but DOM 0 won't even take advantage of all the cores. It only takes a little bit of what it needs, because all it really has to do is get the kernel going and start letting all the virtual machines, which can access all the hardware, run within there. So it's really a basic, like, don't touch it appliance built. They only have the minimum piece of Linux. It's loosely based on CentOS. We know CentOS because of, well, IBM and Red Hat, and that debacle kind of went away. So Vates took over fully upstream and forked CentOS, but it's just for XCP-ng. It only has what's needed in there and nothing else. There's you have a lot of specialized commands you can do from the command line because there's a Xen API that controls everything. So they don't even need like a full robust Linux distribution. They just need enough in there in DOM 0 to get things done. And then all the guest OSs load right on top of DOM 0. Like I said, they get full advantage of all the hardware. Installation, super easy. I'm gonna run through a couple installation screen grabs here. Download it from their site. Next and yes, your way through a very familiar standard looking old style interface. I actually like these installers from the old versions of Linux. This, the CentOS or Red Hat installer from back in the day. Really easy, goes through, asks you a few questions, easy enough to set up. And then the host itself lands here on the screen. It's all terminal on the screen, but at least you can control things like the status of the system, network management, the virtual machines. You can start and stop them from here. So you don't have to do anything really from a command line. You can start and stop them from the command line, but you can get the basics done in terms of having this work. Now, one of the things that's really important to the concept that we're going to go through in Xen is there always has to be a master of all of the hosts. Even if there's only one host, it has to be the master, and then all the other hosts takes its cue, because Xen itself is database driven. So a couple of the things that sometimes you do have to get to the command line for is if you ever lost the master in a pool and you don't have it set up for like high availability, you have to choose which system is a new master on there. And that's where all the resource pool configuration goes on there. But they've given you a lot of tooling that isn't too hard to use. You don't have to be even that command line savvy to be able to go through these menus and, get things going, change it. If you change a network card or something like that, and you can't get to the web interface, you'd be able to go through here and be able to get things done. Now let's talk about Xen Orchestra. Xen Orchestra, so you have the hardware, you load XenServer on it, and XOA. You'll see different nomenclature for this where they call it XO or XOA. When they say XO, they mean Xen Orchestra. When they say XOA, they mean Xen Orchestra Appliance. The difference is, and this is where kind of an upsell, if you will, when businesses want to buy this, Vates provides a complete turnkey solution with their Xen Orchestra appliance. It's the same open source software, but the appliance will auto pull images from the Vates team themselves and auto build itself. When you want to build this with Xen Orchestra using the open source tools, there's a script you can run and build it. It's really easy to do. I've got lots of tutorials on it. That is just what the team over at Vates calls just XO, because it means you just compiled Xen Orchestra, We're not supporting it. We're just giving you all the code. You support it yourself. Now, I say not supporting it. They only don't support it in an official, like you can't open a ticket with them, but you can ask any of the questions you want in the forums. Matter of fact, the person who maintains a really nice auto build script, he's in the forums. He doesn't even work for Vates, but Vates has actually helped him with his script over on GitHub to improve the way it works. So they completely are for the community downloading, building this themselves. There's no restrictions on it. So you get when you build it yourself, you get everything except for that bottom option that says pro support. You just don't get any support with it when you build it yourself, but easy enough to do. It's a lot you can do with Xen Orchestra because XCP-ng doesn't have currently yet, they have a rudimentary web interface, we'll say. They're working on building a web interface specifically for XCP-ng that runs locally on it. Xen Orchestra runs externally as a separate virtual machine. Generally, you want to run it on the host. And while that may seem obtuse if you use other hypervisors like Proxmox, it's a scaling thing. For a single host, yeah, it doesn't make a ton of sense. But even in that picture I had earlier, I'm standing next to one of the Supermicro Blade servers. So there's 4 physical servers, but then there's 4 servers in there. So there's 16 hosts. When you start building 16, 30 host setups, you still only need one instance of Xen Orchestra. It has a one-to-many relationship. So one instance of Xen Orchestra will manage all of your hosts. So having that one VM suddenly doesn't seem like that big of a deal when you're doing it at scale. Matter of fact, as I'll show, some of the things you can do with Xen Orchestra is spread it across a data center. So you can say data center in Chicago, data center in Detroit, and you can use one instance of Xen Orchestra to manage both of your data centers, all with your hosts inside of there. It's pretty scalable. That's why it seems like a lot when you're setting up for one host, but it scales upwards to some pretty large scale installs. But it has a lot of cool features for, doing live migrations, full access control list. It's multi-user, so you can have different users with different permission levels, automation and batch operations. It's all done through the web interface, and we're going to show some of that a little bit later. The other really nice feature is it manages all the backups for everything, including doing full DR testing. So one of the things you can do with a backup is not just back it up, but then you can do a restore, because as the joke goes, nobody cares about a backup that works. We want a restore that works. And how do you validate that restore? Well, that's actually an automated feature inside of the Xen Orchestra system where you can say, back up this virtual machine, and then you can have a chained job essentially that says, now go ahead and restore it on another host. You can be a completely separate host, even at another data center. So it'll actually pull a backup, it can run a job, and then it can say, restore it and see if that VM boots elsewhere, validate that it boots and make it part of a report and send it to me. So you get a whole chain of command of, we backed up the VM here, we restored it on your secondary infrastructure over here to validate that your failover would work. It booted up, we shut it down, we deleted the instance, and here's your report. All that's automated inside there. So it's actually really nice. And all these backups are agentless because it's talking to the host itself, the XCP-ng host. So there's nothing you have to load to the underlying operating system to get these backups to work. And they have a lot of documentation. And as I mentioned too, I've got a ton of videos that step you through any of the different features in Xen, everything from their high availability to how their backups work and how to set up full DR plans with it. The way I do things on YouTube is we'll do things for customers and projects. Of course, customers always want documentation. Well, how do we work this thing? I make videos and make sure the videos are very concise, and customers use these videos to make sure they understand some of the infrastructure we set up. Now let's talk a little bit about how the pools get built with the hosts. So you load XCP-ng on a piece of hardware, then we have the XCP-ng host. We'll have some local storage, and then we have the pool network. The resource pools are always part of Xen. Other hypervisors like Proxmox have the ability to build things into resource pools. XCP-ng doesn't have a concept of not having a resource pool. Everything's a resource pool to Xen. Once again, it kind of goes to scalability. So even if you have a pool of one, the host is called Tom. The pool would then by default be called Tom. It's really a little bit of a hard concept at first, but when you start adding hosts, it starts making a lot more sense. Because when you have 2 hosts, you still have the pool network, and you have host 1 and host 2. You can call the pool whatever you want, but as you start stacking all these hosts, The networking is defined once at the pool level, and this is why you do want to make sure all your hosts are as close to being the same as possible and should be plugged into the same network. So ETH0 and ETH1 should be the same on each host that's joined, because when you define networks in Xen, you define them at the pool level, and every host gets a copy of those network settings. This is what allows you to take a VM and move it anywhere, and it's always defined by its resource pool going, oh, okay, if I'm on this host or this host, if you told me to be attached to this particular network with this name, that network's the same across every host in the system. Same with shared storage. You can have local storage, but as you get to the enterprise environments, you're going to have a shared storage. And those shared storage, once you add it, it automatically adds it to all the hosts. So they're aware of all the storage in there. And as you can move VMs between different hosts, it's always living on that particular shared storage. And as you get into things like high availability, the way Xen works for high availability is it uses the shared storage as a witness. That's what solves a split brain problem when you have a 3 hosts and one of them goes down to figure out who's down. The storage actually works as a witness, and you can add many, many shared storage to a pool. So there's not any particular, I don't know what the upper limit is, but I know it's quite a few I've seen people add. And this is really convenient because it treats them all the same, whether it's iSCSI, NFS, or several others that you can attach to it. There's even ways to attach like Ceph storage to it. Once you have a shared storage system attached to it, you can migrate the drives live between any other shared storage. This is actually really nice when you're doing production environments and you want to swap a SAN out for another one. You can attach multiple SANs essentially to XCP-ng, and you can migrate the VMs over and then disconnect the old SAN, and you can have this whole step and process done without any downtime at all, which is something I think is pretty neat. So it's kind of showing that I can add quite a few different shared storages to it. And each pool, each resource pool does allow 64 hosts. Technically, you could go more. There's some things you could do if you wanted to have more than 64 hosts in a pool. Not necessarily a good reason to do it, but there is some tweaking that you could do. But 64 is generally enough. Even with our clients that are in data centers, they'll split them up a little bit because you may have a whole rack or two with a group of hosts, and then you can have in that same data center another rack with a group of hosts. Even though they're in a shared resource pool, virtual machines can be moved even live between resource pools. So if you had one pool with 64 hosts and a whole another pool with 64 hosts, live migration can take place. And this is controlled by Xen Orchestra. By talking to both pools, you could say live migrate these VMs across pools. So the limitation is only kind of artificial in terms of the restrictions on what you can do with it, is how I would describe it. Now let's talk about how the XAPI works. So each one of these is representing a resource pool. We have the Xen pool here. The Xen pool would have like 3 hosts in it. Maybe this one has more hosts in it. They all use a Xen API to communicate. Xen Orchestra, as I said, you can have one instance of Xen Orchestra managing multiple hosts, multiple pools. It talks with that Xen API to all of them. And then, because of the way the backups work, Xen Orchestra talks to all these different backup. It can do SMB, NFS, or S3 storage. So those are all your storage options for where the backups can land, but you can have one instance of Xen, one set of backups, or one truth, so to speak, of places you're storing things. And then you can back up all those other hosts, and Xen Orchestra is the conduit for that. Now, something really interesting, Xen Orchestra, because it's using an API to connect, you can have someone else using Xen Orchestra and connecting to the same host at the same time. It's aware that multiple connections are there, and it allows you to do things. And I do this for support reasons. I have a friend, he manages his own infrastructure for his data center. And when I need to help him, I have a VPN that I open up my Xen Orchestra, and I have a VPN. I can connect at the same time so I can just see all of his hosts, see what's going on, or help him with any trouble. It's kind of nice the way that it does that. And if someone changes something and you're on it, it's completely collision aware. So if he renames a VM or something, I see that in real time as he's doing it. So it's really a nice feature for being able to have all of these working at the same time. Now, one of the cool things is for backups, if you're thinking, okay, how does the backup get from a remote host? If you're remote, Tom, over a VPN connecting to other hosts, how do you get those backups sent to a local storage? Because obviously routing them over the VPN may not be the most efficient for moving large VMs around. They have a tool called XOProxy, and it's a proxy tool to handle local storage on areas. So they've got some really advanced stuff. I won't get too deep into it, but they actually have complete ways to handle this. This is how our clients who have this spread across geolocation, different data centers can manage with essentially a single pane of glass for their hypervisor. Now, the resource pools are the way you join them together seems a little bit confusing at first. And what happens is you load your first host, you set it all up, you got some things, then you go, cool, I'd like to add another host to this. When you start adding hosts, first, Xen Orchestra has to talk to both hosts. This is where it seems a little odd because you're like, okay, if it talks to both hosts, how do they become one host or one resource pool? You tell the one that doesn't have anything in it, the one you latest added, you tell it to join that host. And then from there, Xen Orchestra takes the two connections it has and merges them into one. And whichever one you chose to be master in there, it will then only talk to the master host. This is where Xen has kind of an advantage over some of the other hypervisors, is that master host is always a source of truth on the network of where everything is. So all commands are sent from Xen to the master host, and then the master host says, all right, turn on a VM on host 3 or host 4 or host 5. And then that system communicates back, okay, that VM's on. Now that database lives on the master, but it also has a absolute same copy on every single system. So if the master goes down, other than having to choose a new master, or this is done automatically in high availability, then all systems will stay running if the master's down. It just, you can't talk to any of them because it won't accept commands, but it knows all the running state of all the system. So when you choose a new one to be master, that one says, okay, I'm just going to use the last copy I had, and it echoes to all the other ones. I'm the new master of this pool, and it's already synced up because there couldn't be any changes because everything starts with there. This process seems a little bit tricky to get your head around, but once you've used it, you can move the master anytime. So when you're doing maintenance or you want to take one out of a pool, you can just hit a pull down and choose at any time through the UI which one you want to be master. The process takes about 10-15 seconds to switch, and no machines are affected. Whatever state virtual machines we're in, running, not running, they all stay exactly the same when that switch happens. Now, this is what the interface looks like. And, if we have some time towards the end, I can show you like a live views. I have access to this on the same system. But this is the overall interface. And you go in, you can see all the different virtual machines that are running. We can drill down into the virtual machines, and from there, we can see like the number of processors, memory, etc. It's got some statistics on this side, but then you can go to a stats page to really see some of the stats. There's a little poll down there to let you go a little bit further in. So if you wanted to dive deeper into any particular stat and say, what does it look like for the last 10 minutes, hours, or I think it goes up to a month back, and it just gives you kind of nice RRD graphs. You also have console access here. So you can look at the console, log in if you need to get access because you broke the networking in a VM, or in the case of Windows, you need some point and click access. That's fully supported here. Networking. This is where you can not just adjust the networking. This has a built-in Open vSwitch, so you can do some advanced ones. So right now, I don't have it with any allowed IPs, but it does tell me the IP address for each of these. It lets you add networks dynamically. So even without restarting the VM, I can add more network interfaces to it. Everything's hot plug, but you can do fancy restrictions on here with Open vSwitch to lock this VM down to say it can only use these VMs, or only use these IPs. So having Open vSwitch and traffic rules built right in is pretty clever if you're doing this in like a hosting environment where you may not be in direct control of the operating system, and you certainly don't want them using any IP address they want. So you can restrict it to very specific IPs. Same thing with drives. They can be added on the fly. This is where you can attach disks, expand disks, etc. Oh, and the little checkbox there where it says CBT, this is a feature that came within the last year that they fully flushed out. It allows change block transfer notices. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the backups, but essentially, when you do Delta backups, it can do change block transfer and have your backups done extremely fast. It doesn't need to snapshot or anything. The backups are essentially deltas with just looking at the change block from the existing blocks in the backup. So the backup system being integrated like that gives this fine grained control and very fast backup speeds. Snapshots, just like any snapshots in your hypervisor, like VMware does or Proxmox. But you also have the ability here to do snapshots with memory. So if you had a system in an exact running state, you can do the snapshot with memory. You can do that with the backups as well. You could say back it up in its exact running state with the memory. And then when you restore, it'll restore to that exact running state with memory and everything on there. It's also kind of cool for forensics. If you want to pull out the memory file, there actually is a way to extract it and see what was in the memory if you want to do forensics. Then we have the backups here. Now, the backups, there's a whole job panel for creating backups, but as you attach them to the virtual machines, they also show up on this field for the virtual machines. You can have more than one backup job on these. So you can have like one that runs daily or one that runs weekly. You can have them set up separately or have them different targets, and all those would just show up here. It's also convenient because you can click on the button and it will show you exactly what the status of that backup is. This was a Delta backup. It took this long to run, and all the details. And being green, it makes it easy. That means success. If it was red, it had failure. It would tell you what that failure was. Then at the top, you have some migration options where you can migrate to other hosts in the pool or even other pools. And it does have some fine grained control where you can select the migration network. So if you actually have several hosts and there's several network options between them, maybe you have only a management network at 1 gig, but you've bonded together some 10 gig ports, you can then choose where you want the traffic to go for that migration. There's also a way to set a default migration network. So when you have separate management, but that might be slower links than your primary links, you can choose to say just default to this network because it's the fastest connection between the hosts to get the transfer done. And of course, you have logging on here, so you'll know what happened to this VM. And it does log what the user changed. So I can look at a VM and say this user started or that user stopped it, or this process started or stopped the virtual machine. And then under the advanced tab, few kind of the standard things: force shutdown, force reboot, just your standard one, deleting it, boot order for the drive. You can control processor limitations in here. You can also choose like CPU weighting. It also has the ability to choose how you want the cores or sockets presented. So depending on frequently licensing, if you're dealing with Microsoft, things may be licensed based on socket. You can control how that's presented to the underlying OS here, to the guest OS. So that way it fits better with whatever your licensing scheme is. Also has things like auto turn on. So if the host loses power or whenever you reboot the host, you can tell it to auto turn on. Protect from accidental deletion and block migration are nice too. Maybe you want it locked into this particular system. You can do that. You also have, when you're using high availability, you can set affinity host to say, this one needs to have an affinity to be on this. And this is really nice if you have like database servers that you want, or web servers, especially when you have them load balance across several systems. And if you have an event where they have to be migrated, you may not want all of your web servers on a single host because that could be a problem. So you can say, well, these group has an affinity to this host and this group has an affinity to this host. So it does give you fine grained control of where they'll land when you're dealing with high availability situations. You can also pass through USB and PCI. So if you have PCI devices that you want to have pass through, you go to the host, choosing to pass through, and they can be passed through to the virtual machine. Of course, this breaks migration if you've attached it that way. Same thing with USBs. You can pass through the USB ports, anything you have on there, and just send it right into the system. Uh, the pool menu looks very similar, and this is where you're going to define all of your networking. You have stats for the overall pool. This is giving you stats for every host in the pool. When you define the networks, you define them here. They're defined for all hosts simultaneously. So you only having to define networking once. Every VLAN you set up, I set up my camera LAN, some lab LANs I have on this thing, define once, view everywhere. The menu for setting up is pretty straightforward for building it. And because there's a pool pulled on at the top, that's because Xen Orchestra, if you have multiple pools connected, you choose which pool you want to create network, kind of that single pane of glass. Everything's aware of all the other pools it's attached to. So you can, as I was saying, like helping my friend over a VPN, I can actually, have my system and other systems attached here, add and change network settings. One of the other things you have the ability to do is create encapsulation, or they call it SD-WAN. It's an encapsulation LAN. So you can do GRE or VXLAN. And they refer to it as a private network. But what this does is set up software-defined networking in the back end using Open vSwitch again, along with some IPsec tunnels, and will create a virtual network. This virtual network can be an interface that is shared not just across the systems, like a private one between all the hosts, but even across pools. So if you wanted to have one common network that's spread across multiple locations, that's an interface you can attach to all your different virtual machines, this has that ability to do that. It's a pretty neat feature, and I've seen some unique use cases where it's kind of like a back-end management LAN I've seen some companies use for, where they want to have one network that's like a secondary adapter across VMs that are spread across even multiple data centers. Now, when you look at the host itself, this view is very similar. Again, they have a common layout, as you're kind of noticing here. So this is the host view. I can see all the advanced. It has stats, console to the host itself, networking, etc. The reason there's a networking tab on the host that is different than the one on the pool is you build the networks inside of the pool, but if you have to assign an IP, obviously you can't assign it to the pool. You have to assign it to a host because each host has to have a unique IP address. So that'd be under the network settings for that. And this is also where you can do things like download system logs, do a smart reboot, force reboot, enable maintenance mode. Maintenance mode will tell the VMs to go somewhere else or shut them down. Force reboot, just like it sounds, reboot. Smart reboot is clever because if you say, I don't really want to have to reboot these VMs, but I want to do a smart reboot can actually pause all the VMs. It'll suspend all of them on this host, reboot it, and unsuspend them all. So you don't have to go through the whole boot up process for all those virtual machines. Kind of just a simple option, but I like that feature that they have on here. The controlled domain memory, that is the DOM0 memory. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't really want to mess with DOM0, but you may want to give DOM0 more memory. And the reason for that is if you're doing something like local ZFS, you want to add more memory to the essentially host OS XCP-ng if you want it for caching or something like that in ZFS. Completely optional, but if you're doing something custom for some reason, they do give you the tools and they expose them through the UI here. You can do it from the command line. Anything I showed you here actually can be done through the command line through the Xen API, but I like that they give you a lot of the options right through the web UI, so you don't have to spend too much time at the command line. And under the advanced tab is also where the PCI devices are. So if you want to enable pass-through on any of these devices, this is one of those use with caution, because if you pass through the networking adapter and reboot, you won't have a networking adapter anymore. The way pass-through works in XenServer is it blacklists it in the kernel of DOM0. So that way it's not locked, but this of course requires a reboot. So first we blacklist it, we reboot the server. DOM0 doesn't load the driver for the PCI device. The PCI device now can be handed over to any virtual machine you want. But of course, as I mentioned, if you did something like pass through the hard drive, you would leave the system in an unbootable state. As much as I like this, I've seen people break things quite a bit here. This is the storage page. You can list out all of your storage. It gives you stats for the storage, IOPS, throughput, so you can always see what's going on with it and see how much load there is on there. When you add a shared storage, it shows you all the hosts it's connected to. By default, it tries to connect to all of them, but in case of there's a problem, you'll see it here. Occasionally people set things up improperly. Synology is an example. By default, if you just next and yes your way through a Synology iSCSI setup, it doesn't allow multiple hosts to connect to it. So if you add it to a resource pool, the first host connects and all the other ones fail until you check a box in Synology. That was a weird troubleshooting one I've done for people. But that'll be displayed here, and it's easy to reconnect them. I didn't have a screenshot for this, but any storage has the ability to go into maintenance mode. Maintenance mode is nice. If you have a Synology or a TrueNAS or your SAN in general, and you go, I need to update this, but I don't want to have to evacuate or stop all the VMs because I don't know which ones are on there to spread across there. If you hit maintenance mode, it'll list all the VMs. And it'll say, do you want us to stop all these VMs? You can just say yes. It'll stop them and stop anyone from starting anything on it. It'll tell the operating system these are in lockdown because it's in maintenance mode. You can do your maintenance, reboot, and then hit disable maintenance mode. So it makes it pretty easy to maintain this without having to shut everything down. Creation of a new VM, choose a pool. It's got a lot of templates in there. The templates, they do have in their paid offering. If you buy like the fully supported and it's not really licensed, but it's a supported version of it. They give you some images all automatically. If not, you just have to load your own ISOs in here through the ISO repository, and you can build off of Windows templates, Linux templates, Red Hat, etc. BSD works in here. I haven't had any problems getting BSD to work. Sometimes with virtualizing pfSense, and there's a guide on this, you have to make sure you set a couple settings to the networking to make sure the networking is working the way you want. But other than that, building virtual machines and building many of them at once is really easy in here. Towards the bottom, there's actually an advanced option. I don't think I have a screenshot for, where you can say, you can give it like a pattern of name, like Debian %1, and then say, make 8 of these. It'll build like 8 virtual machines. They also have the ability with the templates to do cloud init. And that's obviously really nice if you're going to pull in all the settings automatically. And of course, you can do PXE boot. So you could do PXE boot off an ISO, cloud init, and have it auto generate all of the VMs automatically for you. All right, I can go switch to live. Is there some questions people have? If not, I can kind of run through kind of a live demo on this and share my other screen if you guys like. How much time do I have?
Let's see, what time is it? We got like 45 minutes.
Okay.
There's plenty of time. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to go 45 minutes, but we generally try to wind down pretty close to 9 o'clock.
Okay, no problem. Gib, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. So I have several things, maybe comments and such, but so I used XCP for a while, very impressed with it. There were still some things I was doing with VMware I wasn't yet able to do with XCP, but it sounds like some of those things have been improved in XCP. One of them I ran into was in VMware, of course, you have a license for everything. So you have a license for how many virtual machines you can attach to the various control planes and stuff. And it sounds like this is much more flexible. Can I, for example, move virtual machines from one controlling system to another and over back and that type of thing?
Yep.
And I guess the other thing was, creating a control structure so that, how do I say this? So I can have maybe the virtual machine controlled by both.
What do you mean by both?
I forget what the terminology is, but you have a control, like an orchestrator or a
Yeah.
So you can have virtual machines that. So with VMware, you locked it so that one virtual machine is controlled entirely by one control software, basically.
Oh yeah, like vSphere.
Yeah, so I have a vSphere and it's got 100 VMs in it. I want to add more VMs. I've got limited to how many I have. If I create another vSphere, now I have a problem. Where did I put that VM? Which vSphere is it under, right?
Right.
So I'm looking for a way of better understanding the control of where everything is and that type of thing.
Yeah, because everything's in a pool. So what I did was I went to servers. This is my lab at my Toledo office. So I just enabled that one. And so we have 2 different pools I'm dealing with right now. Pool of Ryzen, that's Tom's. This is my pool. And this is the pool that is in my Toledo office right now. So it separates them by resource pool. And if I go over to, for example, like the pools, here's the 2 different pools on here. When you're creating anything new, you choose what pool you want it to create on. So I want to call it my pool of Ryzen, or I want to create it in this pool. So you always know where they are, but at the same time, I'm not going to do this because it will actually take too long. But if I want to do a migration, this lives in this pool, but I can actually select the destination to be a different pool altogether. So that is supported where you can move things between pools if needed. Doing it over VPN would happen eventually, not ideal. If they were in the same network, no big deal to do that. So yeah, you don't really have to worry about where they are in terms of resource pools, but you can also filter by host. So if that's the other question you're asking, like which host is it on? So I have one. So if we look at the host here, let me go to my pool here, which is this one. We got Ryzen 1 and Ryzen 2. They're running Ryzen processors, so I'm not always clever at naming. But to see where those live, I can filter to that host. This is the ones living on there. Matter of fact, you can move them. So at the top here, and let me zoom in. Maybe this makes it easier to see. Like this particular is running on Ryzen 1 right now. I could also just go, let's just move it over to Ryzen 2. So we're going to live migrate it right now, and it's going to tell me the task is going. And okay, now it's moved. So now it's on Ryzen 2. It moves that fast because the disk lives on shared storage. So migrating them between the different pools, physically different hosts, migrating between different hosts is no problem. If it was a local network, I can migrate them just about as fast between pools, depending on the speed of the connection. My systems are fast because they're, if I go over here to the hosts, my networks that connect all these are at 25 gig. So it takes me they're NVMe. They're all running on NVMEs with 25 gig connections. So it takes me like 4 seconds to move an entire running virtual machine from one host to another. Does that help you understand a little bit better?
Yeah. NVMe was fabulous. I just love that. So I guess another question, since I have a couple here. So and I'm really excited about how good this is. The only problem is, of course, I'm not using it anymore now that I've retired. But it really is a good product. So I had a problem where I was trying to back up the virtual machines, right? The virtual machines were like proprietary VMware virtual machines. And so I couldn't get like an open source product that would, for free do backups. So I'm just wondering just how open is the virtual machine so you can grab information from it and like the state, what state it's in if you want to do, log a certain point and then from that point back up and that type of thing.
Oh yeah, backing up is easy. So Xen PLE. All right, I'm spelling bad today. So I can take this system right here. As far as backups go, now I'm using the integrated backups. We're going to go here and we'll make sure I copy the name. Well, let's do a new backup program. So if we go here, there's nothing on the backup tab right now because there's no backup for this. So if we go here and we're going to build a new backup real quick, we're going to grab that VM. I want to do a Delta backup and I'll pick a landing spot for it. I'll put it on this server. So I have several servers I can land this on. Go to advanced. And we want to use the block transfer, hit create. Go back over to that VM. Make sure block transfer is on, but let me start the VM first. So it actually has some changes in it. Just a Linux one. Cloning VMs and everything is obviously, I cloned this from my lab VM. That kind of stuff is pretty instant on here as well. Not just because it's fast system, it's just the functionality of the way it can fork a system. That's right. So there's some change data. Now let's kick off a backup and I'll show you how the backups work in here. So let this one run. And let it run the process. Now, while that's doing it, we'll go ahead and look at ones I can restore. The way the backups work inside of here, once again, fully open source, it's storing these backups as XVA files on the back end. So it's an open format for virtualization. XVA is almost the same as OVA. There's a few differences to it because the metadata of the VM, it's not just backing up the drive, it backs up the metadata of the VM. So all of that's in here. So as far as if I wanted to restore one of these, you could just click this and restore it. Pick the place you want to land it and hit restore. If you wanted to do this without Xen though, Everything on the back end is assigned a UUID. You just have to kind of sort through the UIDs. There's a JSON file in each one with a full description of what the backup is and what the files are. So you can, without using the whole Xen Orchestra tool, grab these files and restore them if you wanted to. You could. It's not in some weird format. It's not in a VMDK like Microsoft uses. It's not in I forget the VMware one that they use, but it's not a proprietary format. And because Xen Orchestra itself is open source, from a disaster recovery standpoint, all you got to do is point it at a repository and it'll read all these backups again and pull them back in. So it makes it really easy to do. So if we go back to that VM, whoops. And there's the backup completely done. If we wanted to restore it, so let's actually just go ahead and delete this. So let's remove, do a restore.
So you just remove the VM itself, but you have the backup that you're going to restore to bring it back to life.
Yep. And I'll pick a place to land it. We can even say like it's gonna have its own MAC address. It'll if I want to start the VM, and if there's pieces of it on there, you can actually use a differential restore. If you had the old one but it was corrupted, it'll figure out the differential of what is good and what's bad. It's very advanced, but yeah, now in a relatively quick time here, we'll watch it do a full restore of that VM, but not just the VM. It's not like just the drive. All the settings we had for that VM are coming back with it. The network settings we may have customized.
Right.
All of that, because the metadata came with it. If you look at,
wasn't there a way of like changing user ID passwords and stuff like that as your?
No, it's not doing that. It's not going to, because it backed it up as the VM was. See, it's about 29 seconds to go. Somewhere down here too, it will. Yeah, it shows it when it'll say importing here while it's importing. But whatever these settings are that we set, also you can do markdown notes on these. That's part of the metadata that it's backing up. Because I actually have some production stuff in here. Oh, it's restored now. There you go. It adds the restore date to it. But we'll edit these. I like the fact that you can do the markdown here.
Yeah.
We actually use this, and I'll show you like my production example will be whenever I update this server, this runs our Unify controller. It's running Ubuntu 20.04. I just update to the latest version. So whenever I update it, without even logging in, the staff knows what version, because we add that information right up here. So it's running 9.0.1.4. It was running like 9.0.1.2 before, and I just updated it. I like that as kind of a feature. Something else you may notice, and I think this is just fun, you can put emojis and things. So everything is controlled by these UUIDs right here. So it doesn't really matter what you call this. So if you add emojis wherever, it doesn't change anything about it. The UUID
it's just a label.
Controlled. Yeah, it's just a label.
Yeah. Nice.
Matter of fact, when you're doing the networking, this is one of the nice things. So let me find where's that? Actually, we'll pull our Debbie example. We'll go to a network. So I put this one as it's on zone 2. This would normally not work in a lot of other systems, but because everything on the back end is UUID, we're going to go here to the pool of Verizon network. We're going to find zone 2. It changes it. The VM has, it's just a label. So the labels can be changed dynamically in real time.
Internally, it's just using those UUIDs to link everything together. Yeah,
it makes it really handy to start changing all of that.
Sure.
Then if you don't have to go, oh crap, I got to stop all those VMs running that interface, and I got to rename it. You're like, oh, I actually changed what this actually does in the back end. So yeah, that all kind of works on the fly with there. And I think Lansing, you had a question.
Yeah, does it support using SAN-based replication for disaster recovery? Or is it something you have to like kind of roll your own solution with?
What do you mean for SAN based?
Like you have the SAN, like if you have like a fiber channel SAN, have it do the replication rather than the
Oh yeah.
handle it. But
It gets a little tricky. So you can have TrueNAS as an easy example. You can have TrueNAS doing snapshots on the back end and revert back, but there's no communication between TrueNAS and this. So for example, TrueNAS has the ability with VMware to have the snapshots tied into VMware. There's not that same feature inside of TrueNAS or NetApp or any of the ones I've used that will talk natively to it. So you can't do any of the extra replication at the SAN level that I'm aware of. It. None of the SANs I've seen have any awareness of the Xen Hypervisor.
if you wanted to restore from it, you'd have to manually handle it yourself somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not any easy way to all the disks. I think I can pull this up here. Share another tab, log into this system. All the disks are stored as UUID, so it can be a little tricky to figure out which one's which. Now, that UUID here, let me see what lives on that storage. The UUID is actually right here. So I can copy that UUID. And this is kind of a nice feature. Everything has these copy buttons on there. So I know that UUID, and so I could figure it out. I could also run from a command line and export all the UUIDs for a specific storage repository and build the list. And that way, if you're in something like TrueNAS and you're doing snapshots and you wanted to restore it to a certain point, but there was some confusion as to where those VMs were or what those VMs used to be called, you could do it. It's a kludge, but at least the data is there.
Yeah. All right.
So I've got a question for you, Tom.
Sure.
I've got one XCP-ng host.
Mhm.
I think I've got 7 VMs on it. If I want to start backing it up, do I need to add another storage device or?
The way that works in XCP-ng, and they talked about changing this, but I think it's hard because they've always called it this. These are remotes. Remote means backup target. So you don't actually add storage like you do over here. So here's our storage.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've got this Synology. I got this TrueNAS box right here. But the remotes are separate. The remotes are, I have one that's a S3 remote. I have a Storage remote, also running S3.
Okay, but that's an external storage thing.
Yep.
Whether it's a
Yep.
okay. So
and
do I need one of those?
Well, you have the option. You can say I want to have an NFS. Give it the name. If type in the host, type in the path to back it up, or you can choose SMB. Standard file share if you have a Windows system.
Right. Well, but I still need another device of some sort to.
Yeah, you need
that
something.
Okay.
You need somewhere to.
Yeah.
land.
Okay.
Well, kind of hacky. I'll at least mention this as possible. This local lets you store it on the Xen Orchestra instance itself, so you can.
Yeah, but if I'm backing up, I don't want to.
Right.
I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket.
What I've seen people do is attach USB drives to their Xen Orchestra instance and then pass it through. So once again, it's kind of flexible. I don't think it's a great idea, but I've seen people do some fun things. So it's a separate. The tinkerer in me likes it. The person who has to manage production systems hates it.
Yeah, but if this is my home network and I just want to be safe, I could get away with a USB attached drive, right?
Yeah, there's a way you can make that work, but the more ideal system, and this is a Synology NAS that this is attached to.
Yeah.
So that's an easy way to. This is a true NAS box that it's attached to. It's specifically this true NAS box. This is where those backups are going, and it's just an NFS share. This is the one we just did the, backup
Okay.
to, and that's the easiest
Okay.
way to do it.
So I could pick up a Synology box with a bunch of terabytes of storage.
Yep.
Put it on my network, and then I could just be backing up to that.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to do it. And when you're
Yeah.
building the backups, you can build them with automation. So you can say like, this one here backs up. We'll edit this job. So this one backs up every Friday. I think. Yep, that's right. So you can control, like I say, keep 3 copies.
3, okay.
Yeah. And then back up every Friday, but you can change it. I mean, this is actually, I like that it's using cron. So
Right.
it's, you're like, oh, cool. There's the cron. It doesn't hide it. It tells you there's a cron pattern.
Sure. All right, that's what I'll do. I'll pick up a Synology box.
You're talking about USB for, file storage and stuff. I ran across a system that I tried out, played with for a while. That was a USB drive that would set it up to share them on the network as like a network drive. And you could have multiple USB thumb drives connect to this thing, and then it would all have IP addresses and that type of thing.
Yeah, there's some clever stuff out there. As long as it supports SMB or NFS, Xen can back up to it, or S3. We use S3 for the remote backups. That's why that's in there. And when I say S3, it's S3, but it's not actually Amazon S3. Go into the remotes.
Oh, okay.
This is a
S3 compatible.
Yep.
Okay.
I use MinIO. I don't know if you've ever used it before.
No.
It's built into. Well, it's not built in really. It's something you can use. This is TrueNAS. If you go to their applications, it's in their application repository. There's MinIO running, and this handles the S3 connections. This one is connected to here locally with me, and my office backs up to here. My studio, I have kind of a mini data center here at my studio / house where I do my recording, but all that comes back here. So I always have all the copy of the backups, and then all my backups are replicated over to our office, because we have 2 proper data centers for the office.
Okay.
I just like to have extra copies of everything.
Sure.
I've got another question if you're ready for one.
Sure.
So you talked about resource pools. And so in VMware, I was really frustrated. All the resources were like hidden within VMware. You couldn't get to them with other tools. So I'm kind of wondering just how open this is. Is this something that I could use another type of tool to get into the resources and maybe like list things and categorize and that type of thing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. From the command line with XenServer, all of it's open. So you can use the commands. Matter of fact, some people build things with the API. You can even use Terraform on this. So you can go through, look at the API calls. There's some Terraform templates out there, and you can use third-party tools to completely manage this. It's really clever how they did it. So nothing's obscured from you because it's fully open source. I'm not going to say it's obscured from the UI. There's more enhanced metadata options from the command line. They're just like the obscure features probably no one would ever use, like whether or not, if you go to a VM, for example, one of the things that's not in here is the ability to go to the network. There's a couple extra network features. Even if we pull advanced, oh no, they added it. I'll say checksum offloading used to not be here. Now it is there. So that one's been added, but there's a couple other parameters if you ever had to tweak something, but you can do it completely from the command line and expose everything, or call it from the API. So yeah, there's not anything really hidden. They expose a ton from all the UI elements here. Because you can even do things like build VTPMs on here.
I got another question for you, Tom, when you're ready.
Yep, go for it.
How well is older hardware supported?
Old hardware seems to work quite well because I haven't really had much of a problem with it. Tons of people run this, especially on those old Dell 610s and things like that. I mean, those are several generations old, but they're
yeah, that's what I run.
Yeah, but they work. I mean, you only really pull them out of retirement when you have to, like, because we, from a business standpoint, we have to make sure things are under a support contract. But from a home lab standpoint, you don't. And
It
there's a
doesn't break,
plethora
I
of
don't
them out
replace
there.
it.
Yeah, they work. I actually run a lot of them on the Ryzen ones I have are custom built. The other host we have, one of the hosts that, well, our lab host that this is on is a R740. So this is a more modern Dell, but I run them on mini PCs. I've built quite a few mini PCs and load XCP-ng on it. It works great. Those little cheap ones from B-Link and Mini Forums and all those different ones you can find. I was shocked at how well it works on those.
Yeah, I've run it on Raspberry Pis.
Huh.
XCP-ng itself won't run on Raspberry Pi yet. They don't have it compiled for ARM.
What's the state of the XO store? Isn't that the hyper-converged storage?
Oh, the hyperconverge. So hyperconverged is running Linbit on the back end, so it's available. They officially support it. So right now there's 2 releases of Xen, and officially right now, and we'll pull it up as I think they have this on here in their download center. So if you get the long-term support version, which has, I forget how much longer it has support for, another year or so with their LTS 8.2. 8.2 officially supports it. They consider it beta on 8.3, but it's supposed to be any day now, like within February, March, that they're going to have it officially released for their 8.3. But that is, they don't have good instructions, and people have been complaining about this. It's open source. You can have it. They're like, but it's all command line driven. They have no automation to build it unless you buy their fully integrated Xen Orchestra license support versions, and they set it up for you. So that seems to bother some people. If you want to do hyperconvergence, it's a little bit trickier. And for example, Proxmox builds in Ceph, so a lot of people like that Ceph like natively comes with Proxmox, which is nice. But Ceph is also a amazing and sometimes delicate flower when you're setting it up. I've seen people get a few settings wrong on that. You upgrade Ceph improperly, you can lose data. Always have a backup before you upgrade anything that's built on Ceph, unless you're really familiar with Ceph, which not many people are. But yeah, they do have it. It's just Linbit on the back end for doing their hyperconverged option.
Yeah.
They're supposed to come out with someone's supposed to be building an install script for people who just want to use it. I've been waiting to, we get clients that use it some in production, but I've been waiting for that open source install script before I'll do a video on it, because that way I don't want to tell people or spend a lot of time demoing things that they can't tangibly have. That's been one of those things whenever I build stuff for my channel. It's no fun. I mean, I want to show you what actually works and what you can easily access for free and download and run yourself.
So XCP-ng versus Proxmox, compare, contrast, why would you use one over the other?
So my problem with Proxmox that I've seen quite a bit of is scalability. I think Proxmox probably wins out. It'd be hard for me to compel someone to say, build your home lab on XCP-ng with one host. It works. It's not wrong. You can do it. Proxmox, because of the integrated web UI and everything, for single host, easy and turnkey for the home lab. Some of the downsides, though, of course, Proxmox is a interface thrown on top of Debian. And if you want to watch a Reddit fight, go ahead and tell people that it's a type 2, not a type 1 hypervisor. And people argue about that. It's not really appliance based. It's Debian plus what the team at Proxmox did. And that's great. I mean, from a tinkering standpoint, I love it. And I love that they baked in an absolute ton of things. But they also don't have the same concepts of scalability because they're using CoroSync. Now, if you actually followed the guides put out by Proxmox, it will tell you to put CoroSync on a dedicated network. Because what CoroSync does is make sure that every system, because every system has its own status, is in sync with all the other systems. So that means if I have 10 hosts and I start a VM on one of them, it tells all 10 hosts, hey, I'm starting this VM, and it echoes that command out to all of them. And they all do the same thing. They echo out the command, okay, I started this VM, or I stopped this VM, or I'm going to migrate this VM to one of these hosts in a pool. That CoroSync networks sometimes get out of sync. And I'm helping someone migrate off of Proxmox that had 6 hosts because they ran into some of those problems where when the hosts get out of sync, the solution is to stop them all and start them up again. This was a scary thing for this person. Found out that his whole resource pool started rebooting to get back in sync. He's like, well, that's not expected. And I'm like, well, actually it is. That's how it's going to get synced back up, because it's tricky to get Proxmox back in sync. Because Xen Orchestra is database driven, there's only one source of truth, and the source of truth tells everyone else what to do. So one output, everyone else listens. And so from that aspect, I like it. The next problem is, especially for businesses, Proxmox does not offer the support you get with XCP-ng. If you buy it through Vates, you can get full SLA agreements. And when I say we're putting this in data centers, those people expect full SLA agreements with 2-hour response times, 24/7. So we sell full contracts with that. I can't do that with Proxmox. The other problem I've seen is Proxmox breaks on updates, because a Debian update that comes through, that when they went from version 7 to 8, there was some problems with networking that broke a lot of networking. If you're a Linux person, no problem, go to the command line and fix it. But you can't even get to the UI. And most people, the average sysadmin, doesn't always know Linux, unfortunately, especially if they manage a bunch of Windows servers. They expect their hypervisor system to have a web interface and press update and it work. The updates for Xen Orchestra and XCP-ng come directly from Vates, like an appliance. So the updates are vetted. They come through like only what's needed and no more. So it makes it really easy for it. I've never had an update at all. Well, no, I mean, I had an update break RRD graphs. They've done that once or twice, but that's once or twice, and I've been using them since 2018. No changes from updates were ever so breaking that the VMs didn't work. It was always like some UI elements problem or something like that.
Does it support NVMe over Fabric?
To support what?
NVMe over Fabric?
No, they don't have currently the NVMe Fabric support yet.
Yeah.
It's been requested though. It's been discussed in our forums a couple times, because that stuff's pretty cool. That I think my friend Wendell from Level 1 Texas done a couple of videos on that stuff. That's fast. They'll get there eventually. They also have kind of limited support for vGPU. And the reason why they do, there's instructions on how to make it work. It works in Citrix XenServer. It doesn't work in XCP-ng, and it comes down to open source licensing. They want to be able to give a product away with an open source license, so they don't include the drivers for vGPU. There's a lot of debate because these companies license the drivers. So you can put the drivers in. Citrix, the Citrix version, like I said, it still exists. They put the drivers in for vGPU. People have copied them because they know where they're at, so they can copy them over and put them in, and it will work. So it, yes and no, has support for some vGPU. So if you're running one of those situations where you don't want to pass through the whole card, but divide it up, then that can be a challenge. It does support for networking, like the SRIOV, things like that. So you can do that with the network card support that is built in. But most of the time, people are asking about like the vGPU support. And I know NVIDIA has been making some licensing changes. Someone told me NVIDIA went more open with their license recently, so I don't know what the exact status is of that. So hopefully it's getting better.
So I mentioned I ran this on Raspberry Pi. I was thinking of something else. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
But so trying to run Windows on this, I think there was something you had to tweak in the. I don't know if it was something for the pass through and something like that. But I remember there was tweaking they had to do to get Windows to run on as a virtual machine. And I think. Go ahead.
Let's see, they have a template now. So this is Windows 11, and it even has because Microsoft's requirement of having VTPM, that's in here too. So Windows, including Windows 11 or modern versions of server, all work fine in here now. Yeah, that's what I was looking for, the VTPM.
So if you were to install a Windows 11 VM from the template, is the template includes like the whole operating system? You just need to.
No,
okay,
when you build a new VM, you would choose the Windows 11 here, but then I have a
Okay,
I mean-
you have to go.
Right.
You need an ISO. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, they need a license too, right? I mean, it's
Oh,
Windows.
Yeah.
Sure. But
Well, there's also a concept of nested virtualization. You know, you put one system on top of another, and it's kind of like all these different methods for configuring that type of thing. And you know, I realized that this was trying to be an application or the lowest level, right? So putting like Windows and then putting it on top of Windows, it wasn't really going to be configured that way. You basically had to have some, you know, software that understands the environment that you're trying to lay on top. So I think people, like you were saying, you might take XCP and then put Windows on top of it, but running Windows and putting XCP on top of that isn't really a good way
Yeah,
to.
no, you just run it as a guest OS, and you know, I have looks like more updates. Get the latest updates. Not now, so gets Windows. Of course, there's more updates.
yeah, right.
But
You
yeah,
can
it
still, like-
runs Windows perfectly fine. I mean, I wouldn't use Windows through here. I'd set up like remote desktop or something, but just
Sure.
wanted to show that it worked.
Sure.
You can still clone a like a Windows 11 machine from like VMware has templates. You can still like pre-install a Windows OS and then deploy it as like a clone or something and have it sysprep it and create new machines
yeah.
that way. Just
Yeah,
so you get you don't have to use the ISO for everything. You can
Right. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. But to get started, you need the ISO.
Yeah.
I don't use it very often, but there's absolutely a feature in here where you can convert a VM to a template. So you can actually build it. You know, if you're in the case of Windows, you're sys prepping it or whatever, or in the case of Linux, you can attach cloud in it to this, and then you can build it as a template to clone from. So that is a supported feature.
Okay, so then if you clone from that template, are you getting a whole operating system or just the configuration?
Nope, you get the whole operating system each time.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know if this was VMware or XCP. You could set up your own repository of basic things you could clone from, right? So you have your own, and you know that was really nice. I mean, you take something off the internet like a OFA or something like that. You build it up exactly the way you want it with user IDs and some of the things specific to your environment, and you save it off. And then next time you want to clone something, you have that available.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't use that very often because what I usually do is the problem I have when I built templates, they get stale and then they have to run updates.
Yeah.
So what I do is I leave this running. This is Debian 12 Lab, and that's what I cloned from when I was when I built that mug one that we just built.
Okay.
So let me go ahead and I don't need this one
So
anymore.
what I consider that's like a golden copy. You have your golden copy, you always keep up to date. There might be some other ones you occasionally have to go back and update and things like that, or kill them and rebuild from the cold.
Yeah, and this right here is where the option is. It took me a second to remember where it was because I don't use it very often. I can hit convert to template, so I could build this, update it, and become my master template. And then when I convert it to template, all of the anytime I want to build a new one, I could just go to new VM and I would pull from this template, and it would just make as many copies as I want. So yeah, that is supported. It's not a feature I use as often.
Sure.
Just because most of the time I just leave things running like these lab systems, and then I stop them, clone them, and then I have them. And they're always up to date.
Then you bring it back up and you keep it up to date. When you clone them, what are you doing for IP addresses? You doing DHCP?
Yeah,
So that
because it'll generate when you clone, it'll generate new MAC addresses.
Sure. Okay. My servers, I generally like to assign static IP addresses. Yep. So that would be a problem if I cloned one of those, because then I'd have two machines with the same IP address.
Well, no. When you clone them, it generates a new MAC.
Right, but if I'm doing a static IP address,
I'm
not talking about reserved.
Oh yeah. That would be a problem.
So I ran into that quite a bit. What I ran into was I clone something and run it for a while, turn it off, and then I'm cloning some other things, whatever. Someone starts up that old one, and it's got the IP address of one that has been reused, and so I ran into that quite a bit. So it's
that's one of the reasons
if I have DHCP, that wouldn't be an issue. Yeah.
Well, because my lab network stuff is not on there, so that's why it says like lab right here. Everything defaults to the lab network, and the lab network's DHCP. My network has got static IPs for things, so yeah, it's different. But I have a separate lab network that is DHCP because everything starts in a lab, and sometimes we'll move it to
Sure. Okay.
I got lab 101, 102, 103. We have a whole lot of lab networks. That way we can build kind of elaborate systems and have them talk to each other.
So who's your DHCP server on that lab network? Is it one of your VMs?
So the first lab has an actual DHCP server from the head end, which is pfSense. All the other ones don't, because what we do is in the first lab, we'll start up a pfSense again, and there's a virtual pfSense that then we attach to all the other labs.
Okay.
Yeah, I ran into a problem where we were using Class A IP addresses, which I guess is kind of rare for internal use. But we ran out, so it was like, okay, what do I do? So I was like, okay, use private IP addresses and things like that. But then you ran into problems with trying to address those outside the lab and all that.
Yep.
So I used, can't remember what the name of it was, some software that allowed me to remap them and that type of thing. And that turned out to be real. So I could use IPv6 internally. And that was unlimited. No limit to how many I could use. I think XCP supports IPv6 as well.
Yeah, it does. Both are supported. This is the pfSense. It's off right now because we're not doing anything with it. But this will pull its WAN from CGNAT. I just have an internal CGNAT set up, carrier grade NAT, and then here's all the places it's attached. And I can dynamically change what it's attached to depending on what type of lab we're building. Then we simulate. Inside of here, we'll simulate client networks with WAN Lab 1, WAN Lab 2. We do this for deployments. If we were pre-configuring firewalls for people, I simulate their network subnets. And the reason we have two of them frequently, I'm simulating their entire site to site inside of here.
Wow.
So when we do our setups before we deploy them, our term is network in a box. It comes in a box. It's got stickers on it, and you plug it in. You don't have to change anything. We validate it with your WAN IP at each location. The VPN's already pre-configured, IPsec, WireGuard, whatever we have. So this a lot of what we use this for.
Wow.
Yeah, one of the things we were experimenting with is something like this, where like a remote site goes down, we drop a box on an airplane and ship it out there, and then they just plug it in and everything.
We do it so when they rack things, they have it. They can just unplug from old and plug into new. Everything, we put little stickers on it, so it's completely labeled. And then we don't have to tell them, hey, log in and switch this, because we didn't use private IPs, on the WAN side. We use their public IPs in our lab that we designed and validated that it all routed traffic.
When you plug it into their network, they're ready to go.
Yep, that's the goal. I mean, you spend more time setting up, but boy, does it eliminate that support time, because no one wants to be on the phone with someone doing this.
Well, so
they want to just plug it and go.
What I was starting to experiment with, never got time to do it, is the data center as code kind of thing, where it's all in Git, and you just run a script and it pulls everything down, including the XCP, the whole configuration, all that stuff. And I think I was just too early, and a lot of that stuff wasn't quite set up well enough to do that.
Oh, and Terraform makes that really nice now. So if you get a really good Terraform build script, you can do that. So we have a special project for a client. We manage one of their data centers. It's outside of, it's in my company of what we do. We have a special team that does it, but it's all infrastructure as code. It's really, it's beyond me. I'm not, I look at it and I'm like, that is amazing that it works. I was like, that is beautiful. I'm glad you guys know how it works.
Yeah, well, I ran into problems where people just didn't understand the concept behind, X as code type of thing. And so they were fighting against me. They wanted to use proprietary software with proprietary commands. And I'm saying, no, all this stuff can be done with open source. You could share the commands, and once you learn those commands, you can move it to any kind of environment. And they just didn't get that concept.
Yeah, we manage all of our DNS with Terraform, and it's just like, it's cool, but also, like, if you want to screw up at scale,
One wrong move.
Yeah, there's a validation it runs to make sure everything got put in right, but it's interesting too because once you've defined it that way and you're using an open tool like Terraform, it allows us to switch providers because as long as we have any, and many of them support this, as long as we have
Right.
providers to support it, we can do a lift and shift really easy. We're not tied to any particular provider. A lot of stuff does run on our own hardware, but some of the stuff we have to run in AWS. But all the AWS, we're not using AWS commands. We're using Terraform to manage our AWS. So yeah.
Mhm.
Well, we've
So you
wandered
can
off
move it
topic
to
a little. Is there any more XCP-ng
you
before we
can
wind this down?
yeah. This is
Do you have,
amazing. I am
do you have
so
any
thrilled with what you're showing us.
do you have any experience with Cloud Stack with
Um,
Azure?
I've never used it. So me personally, no, we don't use it at my company. My friend Jay has a YouTube channel called Learn Linux TV. He does some cloud stack work. Um, it's complicated. That's what I learned about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Finding a cloud stack expert's a little bit challenging, I've learned, because it's a little, to me, it's kind of like cloud stack or even, things like Kubernetes. They're 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 pretty niche. Like they're very popular, but boy, finding people who are really proficient at them is a little bit tricky.
Yeah, when I
Alright.
was using Kubernetes, it was network stuff was just like brain surgery, trying to figure out how that stuff fits together. You have to set up a private network for this, and you have to know the
Yeah.
range. That time, after a while, it took me 3 months to get to the point where I could make it fail really consistently rather than something new every time. So yeah, Kubernetes was kind of fun. But that was the thing that I got to run on Raspberry Pi because that'll run
Yeah.
on anything. Yeah.
Yeah, Kubernetes. I mean, you don't get the size of Google without something like Kubernetes. It's a beautiful orchestration tool for things, but it's just has a high level of complexity. I remember, Reddit had that big outage last year, and they did a great debrief on it of why they went down for 16 hours, and it was like Kubernetes is hard. That was like they're like, and here's what went wrong when we did an update to this version of Kubernetes. Who else had a big outage? Proton. Proton had about a 12-hour outage, and they said Kubernetes upgrade went wrong. And that's it. And you can't just revert it. Once you've updated, you have to commit to the bit and keep fixing until it all does that. It's, these orchestration tools are amazing. You can fail at scale. There's a good podcast I listen to. I think it's called the Cloud Security Podcast. If you look for an episode with a Google engineer, and he's the Google engineer in charge of security for Kubernetes. And it is a great listen, but boy, when he talks about like when someone infects and how Kubernetes will keep replicating the problem and you find it in the resulting thing that's running, but you have to keep chasing it back to the source of how it got into that to make the result. He walked through those scenarios. I'm like, in how the tooling, Google's had to really work to come up with the tooling to do better security around Kubernetes. It's like it orchestrated and built this resilient system, so it didn't give us enough tools for logging and the concept of just like in Docker, how everything's very ephemeral. It makes it really tricky. It's not like normal Linux troubleshooting. The normal tools we have of just looking at things and logs kind of fail us a little bit.
That's one of the things I like about XCP. It's kind of intuitive in terms of the way it does things. When I was using Kubernetes and things like that, well, even when we were using like in the Amazon cloud services or Google Cloud, there were things that were like, I don't understand why it has to do this way. We were using a cloud service at a company, and there was one configuration item in this disk definition, right? So you're defining your space, and 3 months later, we're finding out, oh, wait, we had to do it a different way. And so that meant that we had to redo all of the disk spaces that we had created since then. And then remember that this configuration had to be this way. And the way that these younger, folks would do this, whenever they wanted to build new disk space, they go out to the internet and do a search for how to do this, grab the commands, and then enter those commands without doing any documentation or figuring it. So every time we start reintroducing the same problem over again.
I use Portainer because I manage Docker from the command line pretty good, but occasionally what I'll run into is I'm like, okay, I need to do something with these volumes or networking, and this makes it really handy. So if you haven't heard of Portainer, if you're doing some Docker stuff, it's free. It's open source. Well, I think this is open. They always bug you to upgrade to the business edition. I think there's some extras, but this makes managing containers and the networks attached to them a lot easier, because Docker's great when it works, and then it's a head scratcher when it's not.
Wow.
All right.
I'm mind is blown. Thank you so much for
You're welcome.
For this presentation. This has been great. It's especially interesting to me because I am using it, and now I've got to go order a Synology box.
Yeah. So Synology is one of the easiest turnkey ones to do. I'm a big fan of TrueNAS. I do a lot of that, but TrueNAS definitely has a higher complexity than Synology for getting set up and going.
Yeah. I want to buy something.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend too much money on it, but I want to just buy something, plug it into my network, and go.
Yep. Synology is great for that. Also Synology has so many cool features, like their active backup tools and things like that, which ones I really like them as a box. They really pack a lot in them.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming by tonight. I really appreciate it. This has been a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
Had a real nice turnout. I'm happy with that, and this is great.
All right.
I really appreciate it. I look forward to having you back sometime.
All right, man. I'll be around. Everyone, take care.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom.
Right. Later.
Well, that was pretty good, eh, guys? Everybody's muted.
Very interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that because it that I've done before, and so I was interested in it. You know.
Gib, were you doing this at American Airlines or back when you were at Ford?
Back at Ford.
Okay.
Yeah, American Airlines was moving my thing that I say is when I was at American Airlines, I was helping the airline move to the cloud.
Yeah.
So that's what they were doing. They didn't want to have any, all the physical devices. They just turned over to me because I knew how to do that.
Yeah.
They didn't. Some of the younger guys didn't even know Linux commands and stuff like that. So
the younger guys,
stuff they didn't know how to work.
Those young
they were trying
whippersnappers.
to get me to use the Azure, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in Azure, so
that's pretty neat. So a reminder, next month we're doing the code of what's it called again? The
Advent of Code.
Advent of Code. Yeah, I'm thinking code of conduct. Advent of Code. If you guys want to participate, great. If you just want to show up and watch and maybe learn something, it's a great opportunity to do that. You see all kinds of different programming languages and how we solve fairly simple programming problem using a bunch of different languages. It's kind of neat. So again, you can check that out on our. I'll when I make the announcement, I'll put the link to the GitHub page or the GitHub repository on our website. But somewhere here, if I can find it, I did paste the link. Let me paste it one more time. This is to everybody. So that's in the chat, the link to the GitHub repo. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys all next month. And thanks for coming. And thanks again to Tom. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everyone.
All right. We'll see you guys.
See you later.
I'm going to shut down the meeting in just a couple of seconds. So thanks for coming. Bye-bye.